Imagine that everything in your life is happening in the best possible way, in a way you had never imagined. Her company is a success, and her father named her heir to the South Korean family company, despite her not being the firstborn. This results in his brothers and sisters-in-law revolting. However, something happens when you are doing the last tests of a suit made for extreme sports. A storm suddenly forms when you are high up and tractors start flying close to where you are, and then you faint. When you wake up, it appears to be in a forest. However, you have no idea what is going on and only realize that you are in a dangerous area when a North Korean army officer is willing to hide you and help you return home. How will our protagonist get out of this? I'm Nina, and today's recap will be Crash Landing on You. The story begins with the employee, more of the protagonist's right-hand man, showing how the team will work to cover a scandal in the news. She was caught going out with a man who is a well-known actor. However, it turns out that Se-ri sees the situation as a strategy to boost the company's sales, so she asks that the earrings, necklaces, and accessories from the new collection not be blurred in the photos and increases the stock of these pieces in stores. The protagonist receives a call from her older brother. Their father is going to be released on parole, and the man, despite not agreeing with his sister's actions, thinks she should come to see her father. However, Se-ri doesn't seem to be very close to her relatives, and as soon as she hangs up, she blocks her brother's number. The protagonist's sister-in-law and her brother believe that her father wants to announce the heir to the family company, which is why she asked everyone to attend. The media believes that the person who will occupy the position will be one of his two sons. However, when almost everyone is gathered at the table, the two brothers and especially the sisters-in-law begin to talk about what each one did wrong that harmed the company in order to influence the decision of the head of the family. When Se-ri arrives, she greets her father, wishes him to take care of her health, and refuses his request to return to live in that huge house. After saying goodbye, she receives an unexpected surprise from everyone there. The head of the family offers his position to his daughter. He recognizes that the woman left home and started her company 10 years ago, always making it grow, so he believes that she is the most competent for the position, and Se-ri accepts. But as she is a very busy person, she leaves it to meet another day to stay up to date with what is happening in the company, and her father left it up to her to decide to fire and hire whoever she wanted. And then the protagonist leaves. The next day, Se-ri, along with a film crew, will test a line of clothing for extreme sports that she will launch. Her right-hand man thinks it's a bit risky for her to participate as the person who will test the product. He thought it would be better to just send a report to her boss. However, she explains that she is in a hurry, as her position will soon rise. The man continues to think it is dangerous because of the speed at which the wind is, but the woman insists on doing it. Everything is going well until a storm starts to arise and the protagonist ends up involved in it, spinning around with tractors, animals, and other things. She goes out. In the next scene, we see North Korean army officers. They go to meet South Korean officers, who are with 3 men being detained from North Korea after being caught looking for cultural artifacts in the South and gathering information. At one point, the soldiers began to lower their weapons. However, the men who were being detained picked up a pistol that was on the ground and began to fight. The soldiers receive an order not to engage in conflict, so the North returns with its men home and the South goes to its area. Now let's get to the facts. The North Korean army is monitored by the State Security Department, and these 3 men that Captain Ri was treating like thieves received authorization from within to cross the border with the South. The captain informs the Lord that he appears to be part of the State Security Department, which promised the Southern captain that he would investigate the thieves, and Mr. Cho says that he will make a promise to the captain. If he catches him committing any act that could threaten the security of the army, he will not go easy on Ri Jong, regardless of his social class, so the man will be liquidated immediately. In the next scene, we see the captain's team of soldiers drinking a good wine that has been stored for a long time. They know that they cannot drink it during watch hours, but as the next day they will change shifts and have lighter duties, they believe that nothing will happen, and they decide to enjoy it. Meanwhile, the protagonist's right-hand man is freaking out because the rescue team still hasn't found the woman's body, but at least the film crew was found alive. The next day, Sairi wakes up in the middle of a forest. She is hanging by her sports equipment and screams for help. The captain and another soldier are walking through the area, but only Ri Zhong hears the woman's call and dismisses his companion to go see the damage the storm caused, while he looks for whoever is asking for help. When he finds her, he immediately points his gun at this unknown person in front of her, and the protagonist, at first glance, thinks it is the army that was sent to rescue her. However, when paying attention to the captain's uniform, she realizes that something is wrong. The man asks her to get down immediately, and the woman complies but ends up falling on top of Ri Zhong. The protagonist presents herself as an employee of a fashion company and prefers not to say her name. She is still a little confused about where she is and believes that they are in an area in South Korea where soldiers from the north were sent on an emergency mission. Captain Ri tries to explain to the intruder that she was actually the one who went to the north, and according to protocol, she would have to go through some procedures. She would be arrested and interrogated. Then the protagonist starts running to get away from him. However, she ends up in an area with mines buried by the storm, and when the man approaches her to help her, she ends up stepping on one. This is the perfect time for Sairi to escape very carefully, but first she confesses to the captain, since they will no longer see each other, that he is her type. As soon as the woman leaves the place, a soldier finds her superior, and Ri Zhong asks the man to pass the message to the rest of the team to look for a woman, arrest her, but not shoot. Then the soldier helps the captain. He disarms the mine with a little fear, as he had only done this in training. The soldiers received the message. However, as they were perhaps still under the influence of the drink, they understood that they should immediately shoot the South Korean woman when they found her. And as soon as they find it, they run to catch it. However, Sairi, with the adrenaline in her body, runs very quickly and doesn't even notice the signs warning about the mines. Thankfully, nothing happened. At one point, she arrives at a fence that is damaged because of a tree that fell on top of her, and she believes it to be the right way. The soldiers try to warn her from afar that she will not reach her country through this place, but Hao was chasing her pointing guns a short time ago. The protagonist decides to take a risk. If they discover that the soldiers let the South Korean woman cross the fence into North Korea, the entire team will be punished by the State Security Department. Meanwhile, they are deploying drones, dogs, and everything else they can to look for Sairi. Of course, her brothers are waiting for the 48 hours that are used to define the case to pass so they can rule her out as an heir. And the protagonist's mother thinks about the conversation she had with her the night before, where her daughter reminded her that she never had a mother she could count on and that she wouldn't do what her wife had asked of her, which was to refuse the position at the company. We see in the next scene Sairi taking off her jumpsuit. She decided that as soon as things got better, she will disapprove of this product, as it ripped easily and the woman got hurt on her leg. The protagonist continues trying to get to her home or somewhere she can use a cell phone to communicate and ask for ransom. And so as not to continue walking in circles in the forest, she marks the trees with bows she made with leaves. We now see those three men who were detained, and Mr. Cho picked them up with the captain. They were really in the south looking for information, and the man asked them to point out to him where a commodity is on the map. Mr. Cho says that the trio will be rewarded, but it is then seen that when they are being taken to a place, on the way, trucks appear and push the car down the hill, the same they do with a woman who was hitchhiking and ended up seeing all. Meanwhile, the soldiers continue looking for the woman, even after changing patrols in that area, and end up finding her sports clothes and then the little bows made from leaves. Sairi has found a small village and begins to believe that she is in South Korea. However, the closer she gets to the residence, she realizes that she has never seen anything like this before. People who don't have energy all day don't care. There are refrigerators or electric stoves, something very different from their reality. Suddenly, someone pulls her into a courtyard, and it is Captain Ri. The man enters into a conflict with himself as to whether he should take this woman's life, as there is still the possibility that she is a spy. When the protagonist discovers that he is thinking that she might be an agent, she starts laughing and says that if he looked up her name on the internet, if she revealed it, Ri Zhang would know that she is very famous in the south. However, another surprise arrives for Se-ri. There is no internet there. The soldiers from the captain's team began to appear at his house. Everyone arrived almost celebrating, as they thought that the woman who was found lifeless thrown from a hill would be the one they were looking for. However, as soon as they saw Se-ri, the glow disappeared from your eyes. Since the State Security Department cannot know that a woman crossed the fence during the soldiers' shift, otherwise they will be toast, so the men are forced to help Se-ri get home. So they come up with a plan. In a few days, Se-ri will take a boat at night that will take her to an international ship and thus arrive in South Korea. The protagonist is enchanted by some things, such as the fact that they don't have a refrigerator and some people have never had contact with one, so they discover other ways to store food without it spoiling. After a while, the team needs to return to their station, so the captain taught Se-ri how to communicate with him in case of emergency, but the woman uses the phone for various nonsense, like to find out if he has scented candles, or how to heat water to take a shower, among other things. Later, Captain Ri decides to continue his investigation after discovering what happened to the 3 thieves. He begins to think that the security department may be involved in keeping trucks secret, as there is a pattern of accidents. The department allows him to investigate and asks him to go to another city the next day for a meeting with the department director. As soon as Captain Ri leaves the room, the 2 men talk about a new account. It turns out that a man scammed a huge amount of money out of a rich businessman, in this case one of the protagonist's brothers, and he is going to North Korea to hide himself. Returning to the protagonist, that moment of the day comes when they turn off the electricity, and she starts to get scared. She thinks they might be doing this to make it easier to take her life, and she despairs when she hears someone entering the house. However, it was the captain, and as soon as she realized who it was, she burst into tears. The man took her a candle that she had asked earlier if she had and several other cosmetics. He tries to help the woman calm down, but it is a matter of days before she returns to her home. The next day, when the captain goes to identify himself in the city he was told to go to, he explains that he is there for an investigation and the men have arrested him. They say that he is the one who will be investigated. Ri Zhang is taken to a location and placed in an electric chair. A man begins to interrogate him, as if the thieves losing their lives were his fault or that he was plotting something. But the captain doesn't lay down his head and chests the man. He says that there is no basis for his speculations. The general, when he enters the room and notices who is sitting in the chair, runs to get him out of there, then curses whoever was sitting in the chair. Interrogating. The general says that Captain Ri is the only son of the director of the Politburo, which would be a central committee of the Communist Party. As soon as the general and Ri Zhang leave the room, the man calls Mr. Cho and asks if he wants to dig his grave, then tells him who the captain's father is. Later, the general and Ri Zhang go to dinner. The captain wants to investigate this accident, as he believes it may be linked to his brother's accident. There are many coincidences and questions that have not been answered. Meanwhile, Ri Zhang's team of soldiers discovers that there will be a random inspection of the houses today and is nervous, not knowing what to do about the protagonist. As they cannot contact the woman, they contact the captain, and the man borrows the general's car. He goes as fast as he can with the vehicle to arrive in time to try to prevent them from hurting Se-ri or something worse happen to your men. Before Mr. Cho and the other men entered the house, the protagonist discovered that Ri Zhang studied music before enlisting. The captain manages to arrive before Mr. Cho takes Se-ri to be interrogated and says that she is his fiancée. He had not introduced her to people before because the protagonist is on a mission in South Korea. She is a spy, and consequently could not provide further information. This lie was what freed them for a while, but they would have to be more careful now. Although most people believed that the woman belonged to Division 11, Mr. Cho didn't buy it much. Later, some of the wives from the neighborhood get together to deliver some plates of food to Ri Jong and try to learn a little more about this story about him having a fiancée. However, as soon as the protagonist appears to help him carry the gifts, they become less suffocating. When the two are alone, Se-ri arranges with the man that as soon as she leaves and they start asking about her, the captain will say that the woman left him. We see in the next scene that Ri Jong's real fiancé, Seo Dan, was studying in Russia and is now back in Korea. However, the man still doesn't know, and as his uncle lent the best car he had to the captain, she intends to make a visit with the excuse of taking the vehicle to go see him. It then shows Mr. Cho going to the bugging department to talk to a man. It seems that the two are directly involved in the death of the captain's brother, and now Mr. Cho wants this man to find out if the captain is planning to do anything about it. Then a microphone is installed outside Ri Jong's house that allows him to listen to everything that happens inside the residence, and the man begins to write down any word that is said in the place. And he remembers years ago, the day of the captain's brother's accident. He was the one who told the trucks where the next target was so they could crush the car, and just before it happened, the man was talking about how proud he was of his brother, that he was a genius at the piano, and that he had composed something for him. The man would show him as soon as he returned home. The listener gets emotional remembering this. The next day, the wives invite the protagonist to help them make kimchi. However, the woman refuses the request, which leads to her being one of the topics talked about at the women's table, as they are all helping to make it. And at the post, when the captain tells his soldiers what he had to do to get the protagonist released from inspection, and Sergeant Kim comments that it looks like what they do in dramas to outwit authority, sometimes the characters even kiss. Ri Jong sends the soldiers to his house to continue repairs, a task he gave to disguise the time the men spend there so they can keep the woman safe and out of trouble. Meanwhile, the captain continues his investigation into the accident that occurred involving the unidentified trucks. The men showed whoever gave them access to the road that they were part of the engineering department that night. However, the man comments that he found it strange that the three carried nothing in their compartments. The man adds about the woman who passed away, and Ri Jong thinks it wasn't an accident with her either, but rather that the woman could have witnessed something. The guard also saw that the trucks had unusual armor on the front of the vehicles. Meanwhile, the protagonist's brother is looking for the scammer who took the company's money. However, in the places where his men are looking for him, he is not there. So his wife suggests that they look in a place that her husband thinks he would never go. She bets that the scammer is there. Returning to the protagonist, the soldiers need to run after a little boy who is a clothesline thief. When they catch him, the child explains that he is doing this because his sister has been unable to open her eyes for days due to hunger. Both of them live on the street, and he needed to get some change to buy something to eat. So Se-ri prepares a bag with several things for the boy to take for him and his little sister. Later, she prepares an award for the soldiers. The woman gives each one a position and a reward for helping her. For the captain, she planted a tomato plant as a thank you. At night, Ri Jong takes Se-ri to the little boat that will take her to the ship. When it's time to get on the little boat, the man decides to go along to make sure she gets on the ship. And since they won't see each other again, they start to tell each other things, like their real names. Suddenly, the little boat is stopped by the authorities, who ask to search the vehicle, and the two hide in the compartment underneath. The protagonist believes that there is nothing left to do, and the captain remembers what his soldier had said about what happens in the dramas, so he tells her not to be scared by what he is going to do, and when the authority opens this compartment, he catches the two kissing. The owner of the little boat explains to the authorities that they hired him to go fishing at night, but as they are young, other things ended up happening. The authority doesn't arrest them or do anything like that, it just orders them to return with the boat immediately, and Se-ri is frustrated to see that the chance to leave the place slipped through her hands. The woman waits for the captain to sleep and leaves at dawn. She leaves him a note, but it turns out that the man heard the gate slam as soon as she left, and when he reads the letter, he goes after her. The protagonist is at the top of a mountain with her sports equipment that took her to North Korea. Before deciding to jump, she tries to contact her walkie-talkie, but as expected, no one responds. Ri Jong comes to Se-ri, and when she realizes that her walk-talk is on, she says that they need to leave the place immediately, as the State Security Department must have already located them. The only thing the two can do is jump, and that's what happens. In Mr. Cho's office, he hands over some money to the eavesdropper, who works directly for him, so the man can buy some meat to give to his son. And in the market, the listener ends up coming across Captain Ri buying coffee beans, perhaps because he is a little nervous because of the man he is watching being in the same place. The man is a little careless when it comes to paying for the food, and a wallet thief takes yours. Ri Jong runs after the thief and tries to keep up with him. However, the captain arrives first at the gang and, in the end, manages to deal with the men surrounding him alone. The eavesdropper thanks Ri Jong for recovering his item, but when he opens his wallet, the thieves take the money. Meanwhile, Se-ri is with the captain's soldiers at her house. He sends the boys there to protect the protagonist if anything happens, and she starts to pay attention to the care the man has for her. She even starts to think that maybe he likes her. Later, two wives from the neighborhood show up at Ri Jong's house to tell the protagonist that today is Young Ae's birthday. If so, they can help their husbands at work, and the two will inspect the gifts to see what is really good. But Se-ri says she won't be able to go and closes the gate in the women's faces. We see Mr. Cho in the next scene. He is talking to that man who didn't know who Captain Ri was and started to interrogate him until the general appeared. This man is sorry for what he did. However, Mr. Cho doesn't care about that. He wants the man to set up a meeting with a contact he has with a person who can find out if the protagonist is really from Division 11. Mr. Cho believes that they can use the woman to bring down Ri Jong's family. Returning to Se-ri, she starts to think that she can help Captain Ri rise in position, so he will have more power to get her out of her place, and one way to do this is by flattering Young Ae, who is the colonel's wife. Senior. So the protagonist goes to the woman's birthday and manages to charm everyone, but especially the birthday girl. She uses her knowledge of fashion and beauty. She even comments that Yoon Ae seems to be younger than Se-ri. The protagonist had to invent a North Korean name so that women would believe she was from the place, and the chosen one was Cho Sam-suk. The captain goes to the engineering repair unit to see if he can find anything about the trucks that were involved in the accident and manages to get a piece of the material that is used to make the armor at the front of the vehicle. And at night, Mr. Cho meets with the man who has access to information from Division 11 to share everything he knows about the protagonist. The man checks and will get back to him as soon as he can. After Young Ae's birthday party ends, Se-ri asks that, if she has the chance, she speaks well of her fiancé to her husband, and the woman promises that she will arrange that. The captain saw that the protagonist was in the house, and so as not to appear as if he was waiting for her, he went up and down the street several times until the two accidentally bumped into each other. The two return home on a bicycle he provided to support their weight. And at the residence, the group has a pleasant evening eating oysters and drinking. Meanwhile, at Se-ri's family home, their father names the girl's brother Se-hyang as the company's new heir, which causes his daughter-in-law and his eldest son to start a fight at the table. They claim that the man is not the firstborn, and they start talking about the things that the man did that harmed the company. The eldest son also adds that Se-hyang wanted to talk to gossip magazines about the protagonist being the illegitimate daughter of the head of the family so that the media would comment that she was not worthy of taking over the company. The man asks his mother to give her opinion, and although the woman never had affection for Se-ri, and now we discover the reason, she says that she thinks her husband made the wrong decision of naming another heir when the protagonist is still alive, fighting to return home. The next day, Se-ri wakes up in the bed in the room, and the captain makes the black coffee that she asked for so much. The man did everything from preparing the beans to grinding and ironing. When Ri Jong is leaving for work, the protagonist has nothing to give him to thank him for the things he has done for her, so she makes him a little finger heart, which leaves men who have no contact with Southern culture confused. When asking her soldiers what this sign means, one of them explains that she is giving her heart to him, as if saying that she loves him dearly. But there is a small detail in the middle of all this. No one knew that Captain Ri was already engaged to another woman, and when he tells his soldiers, they are in shock, as they have always seen their superior as such a straight-laced figure. Meanwhile, Se-hyung and his wife went to Se-ri's company to collect the tax returns with the protagonist's right-hand man. They made it clear that there may be some changes in the future, and as expected, we know that they want to get along. Get rid of the company. In the next scene, we see the captain's official fiancée taking a taxi to go to his house. As she had already said, she was going to get her uncle's car, but on the way, something unforeseen happened and the car broke down. Seo Dan's salvation was that man who is in North Korea, running away from the protagonist's brother. The scammer offered the woman a ride to the place she wanted to go, and as she had no other option, she ended up accepting. The protagonist ended up going to the market with some wives from the neighborhood. However, as it got dark, it became increasingly dark, as they don't use much electricity, and the woman ended up losing her new friends. So the women go to the captain's house to tell him that Se-ri is lost there, and the man runs there to find her. And Mr. Cho received the call he was waiting for from the man who investigated about the protagonist being from Division 11. As expected, he didn't find anyone with the descriptions he received, and now Ri Jong may have problems. When the captain arrives at the market, it is very dark and there are many people there, so he decides to buy a candle and hold it up so that the protagonist suddenly goes towards him, and that is what happens. As soon as he finds her, Se-ri's eyes are shining like she's about to cry. At the end of each episode, there is an epilogue that I only discovered in this one, so I ask you not to cut off my head. We see the protagonist on a very high bridge, but there is a beautiful landscape. Seo Dan and Ri Jong are also in it, and it is only the couple's second date. They took this trip to create intimacy. The woman complained about him only taking photos of the landscape and wanted him to take one with her, so Ri Jong asked Se-ri to do it. Before taking the photo, the protagonist comments that he deserves someone better, and the photo that was taken on that day, Seo Dan keeps in his wallet to this day. When the two are returning home, Ri Jong believes that the time has come to tell the protagonist about his fiancée so that there is no confusion about whether she is developing feelings for him. And the scammer, who had just left Seo Dan at the captain's house, passes by them and immediately recognizes Se-ri. However, he thinks it could have been someone very similar, as he thinks the woman would have no reason to be in that place. Meanwhile, Seo Dan is still waiting in front of Ri Jong's house. As the wives in the neighborhood are very curious, they go to the woman to ask what she is waiting for or looking for in the place. And when they discover that Seo Dan is Captain Ri's fiancé, they are shocked that the man has committed to two women, and soon gossip spreads among the women in the neighborhood. Se-ri and Ri Jong have not yet arrived at the residence. The two are talking about how if the woman who is his real fiancé appeared there, it would ruin their cover. However, the man says that this will not happen as she is in another country. However, as soon as they turn the corner, there is the original bride. Seo Dan ignores that the protagonist is with her fiancé at first contact, but after he introduces the woman as a partner on a mission, he decides to question whether, after the task is completed, they will no longer see each other. And the captain says yes, they will no longer have contact. So Se-ri decides to get out of the situation and says that she will go home, but Ri Jong takes her arm and takes her to the gate of his house, then tells the woman to go in, as it is very dark in the streets. The man is going to take his fiancée to her house, and on the way, Seo Dan says that she knows the love between them is missing, but she is doing everything in order to work and asks Captain Ri to cooperate. As soon as the two arrive at the place where she lives, her uncle drags him in to go in and greet the rest of the family, in this case his bride's mother. The woman insists that he stay for dinner, and as he doesn't have much choice, the man ends up accepting. In the next scene, we see the scammer in his new home, thinking about a date he had with the protagonist, which didn't go very well, but it made the man realize her intelligence, as she made it clear that they wouldn't have a second date and that she knew that he was laying the groundwork for something bigger, so he said Sung Joon should take her brother's money and go far away. Meanwhile, Se-ri receives a visit from the neighborhood women. They went to console the protagonist, as they all know about the second bride, which in this case would be the original. They bring beer and fish to eat, then start criticizing Captain Ri for putting Seo Dan in the car and taking her home. The women begin to feel sorry for their friend, as they think the man is going to abandon her. And the leader believes that they must do something to teach Ri Jong a lesson, which makes the protagonist desperate to calm them down. The senior colonel's wife was so angry that she said she would tell her husband to give the captain a disadvantage in the army, as he was an immoral person. So Se-ri has to think of something quickly to stop the woman from doing this. The protagonist says that she and the captain are like Korea's Romeo and Juliet, that her parents don't agree with their relationship, and that's why they found another one for the man. And incredible as it may seem, this worked with the wives, who became sentimental about the story and agreed to just drink, eat, and gossip. Captain Ri goes to his parents' house after dinner with Seo Dan's family instead. He makes a request to his father that he get a place for Se-ri on the team of athletes who are going to leave the country, and his father says he will do it. However, if something happens and they find out, the man won't be able to do anything. Returning to Se-ri, before the women leave, she talks to young Ae and explains that if Ri Jong gets the star, he needs to be promoted. Suddenly, his parents will become more generous and let the couple stay together, and for that, he needs this to happen first. And the woman promises to talk to the senior colonel about it. The next morning, when the captain arrives, he tells him about the plan to send the protagonist on the athlete team out of the country, and he hears everything. So Se-ri needs to take a photo for her new passport and go to the city to do this before she needs to change her haircut and buy some new clothes that suit the place they are in. The protagonist is out of money, so she decides to pawn her watch to earn a few bucks and ends up finding another original watch instead, which makes her wonder why it is there. And the seller explains that the man who left him didn't even accept money, he just handed it over and never came back. In the next scene, we see Mr. Cho with that wire. The man comments about never finding that watch that belonged to Captain Ri's brother, the same one who was in the pawn shop, and asks if the wire has anything to do with it. When he goes to work, the captain can't find his soldiers, so he tries to find out what happened to them and discovers that the State Security Department is interrogating them. However, none of the boys told them what was happening, and Ri Jong went to the place to release them. When he arrives, the captain tells Mr. Cho that if he is curious about something in Ri Jong's life, just ask. He adds that he must start telling the truth about the things the man is involved in. Then the phone rings and Mr. Cho discovers that he is being investigated. Meanwhile, Se-ri defends her son from listening to other children and teaches him that he must stand up against his bullies. And we see that the protagonist's right-hand man got a recording that proves that the woman is alive. A radio picked up the same frequency that she was using for the walk-talk on that day. In the next scene, Se-hyung meets one of the men who helped the scammer escape to North Korea and tells him that she will pay 10 times more than Sung Joon if they hand him over. And returning to the protagonist, the soldiers are all having dinner at Ri Jong's house, and the man is feeling guilty about seeing his companions all injured. The protagonist knows that she is the reason for all this, so since she has nothing to give to thank them, she makes a little heart for everyone. Which leaves men shocked, as they believe that it is like a declaration of love, but in the end they come to a consensus that it shouldn't be that. And we see that the man listening in his house remembers the day that Captain Ri's brother helped him. Some men were beating him for doing his job and saying what he heard. The man arrived at the place and ordered everyone to leave him alone. Peace, then he extended his hand to listen. Remembering this scene made the man emotional. The next day, the protagonist and Ri Jong are going to the place where the passport photo is taken. However, on the way, they end up facing a setback. The train needs maintenance, and they spend hours waiting for it to be fixed. In the end, The two need to sleep outside, as it is very cold inside the train, so the captain lit a fire and bought blankets, food, and everything else that would make the protagonist more comfortable. And the next day, they managed to get to the place to take the photo. Se-ri even suggested that the two take one to keep as a souvenir for when they no longer see each other, but the captain doesn't think it's necessary. But when the protagonist was no longer around, he asked for an extra photo of the one she took so he could keep it for himself. Meanwhile, the scammer is also in the same hotel where the protagonist is staying, and the men he paid to protect him in the country betrayed his trust when they tried to hand him over to Se-hyang, so Sung-joon needs to escape from them. When the man is at the hotel reception on the phone with Se-hyang, he comes across Se-ri and decides to ask her brother how the woman is. Sung-joon receives the answer that the protagonist ended up losing her life. Then he hangs up the phone and pulls Se-ri to the elevator, so the two can talk. However, the captain follows them and stops Sung-joon. Se-ri explains to Ri-jong that he knows this man and tells the scammer that the captain is your security guard. But the two left a scheduled meeting to talk later. Ri-jong asks the protagonist how they met and discovers that her brothers arranged a marriage for her with this man so that she could live in another country and they would no longer need to see her. Se-ri comments that her brothers must be jumping for joy because they think she is dead, and the captain says that she is talking nonsense because, no matter how much they have had disagreements, in the end they are still family, and they wouldn't want that. While they are talking, a woman who knows Seo-dan enters the restaurant and makes a call to the original bride to tell her that the captain is on a date with someone else. Seo-dan calmly explained to the woman that he was aware and they were just co-workers, but inside his blood was boiling. Then he stops what he was doing and tells his mother that the couple's parents will have dinner together that night, then goes to the hotel where Se-ri and Ri-jong are staying. Sung-joon ends up being caught by the men who want to hand him over to the protagonist's brother, and they leave the scammer very hurt. They give Sung-joon the cell phone so Sung-joon can talk to Se-hyang, and to escape losing his life, the scammer thinks about using the advantage of knowing where Se-ri is to his advantage. So the two make a deal. Sung-joon will have to hold the woman in North Korea and make sure she never comes back, so he will forgive the money that was stolen and leave them alone. When Seo-dan arrives at the hotel, he quickly gets the number of rooms the two are in due to having contact with the owner and catches them leaving the same room. Of course, the woman didn't like it and told the captain that that night they would have dinner with their parents. Afterwards, Seo-dan goes up to the roof of the hotel and ends up meeting Sung-joon there. The two start talking, and he gives her tips on how to win over Captain Ri. The woman also gives tips to the man, but on how to deal with money. Later, Seo-dan discovers that the scammer also knows the woman who is disturbing her and her fiancé's relationship when he sees them talking at the hotel. And at dinner, Seo-dan's mother says a lot of nonsense, but in the end, it results in something, as Ri-jong's father ended up setting the wedding date. Returning to the protagonist, when she is in the bathroom, Seo-dan enters and says that she is a very sociable woman, to say the least, as she goes to the hotel with one man and has coffee with another. Seo-dan takes advantage and already comments that they have decided on the wedding date, making it clear that Se-ri being away from them is the best gift a woman can give. The protagonist returns to her meeting and asks Sung-joon for a favor. She wants the man to inform her father that she is still alive and for him to continue with her plan to take over the company, as she will soon return home. Se-ri's brother was listening to everything, and that's why he wants her to stay in place so much. After a while, the captain goes to the two and tells the protagonist that it's time to end the meeting. He really doesn't like or trust the scammer. Then the two go to a restaurant to eat fried chicken and drink beer, something Se-ri missed doing. The next day, Mr. Cho goes to the State Security Department to be interrogated and manages to be released very quickly after putting on the table the wrong things that the man who was interrogating him did. And Mr. Cho talks to the senior colonel. As soon as he leaves, it seems like the colonel helped him figure out these things about who interrogated him, and Mr. Cho says he's part of his family now. Afterwards, Mr. Cho goes to Sung-joon's house, and the scammer asks the man to keep one more person in the house besides him, which would be Se-ri. When showing the photo to Mr. Cho, he recognizes it at the time. Whoever it is, and the two of them plan something to catch her when she is going to the airport to leave the country. The listener knows all the information necessary for that. Returning, the protagonist tells the women in the neighborhood that she will leave so that the captain and his original bride can live in peace, which is a great excuse for when she leaves the country, and the women are upset to hear about it. The next day, the soldiers and Se-ri go to a picnic to celebrate the woman's departure from the country, and she receives a poem written by them. The captain only participates at the end, as he was preparing for the day the protagonist leaves. The man took some weapons, improved his motorcycle, and will follow her car without her knowing so that he can protect her if something happens. At night, when the woman is saying goodbye to the captain, she confesses that she will miss him and that he is one of the boys who is part of the group of soldiers who will take her to the airport. As soon as the car leaves the scene, the listener tells Mr. Cho to put the trucks into action. Then, on the way, trucks start to appear, and the boy even manages to dodge them well. The captain's help was extremely necessary. He managed to stop one truck, and so only the other continued following the car. But at a certain point, the two are trapped in the vehicle and are unable to get out. While the remaining truck comes towards them, what saves them is Ri Jong with the motorcycle, who throws it in front of the vehicle and then shoots it to explode and stop it. However, the truck driver was still alive, and when the captain was seeing if Se-ri was hurt, the boy and he ended up being shot, but before he went out, Ri Jong shot the driver. And the protagonist finds herself feeling desperate without knowing what to do. This may be her last chance to get out of North Korea, but Se-ri couldn't leave two people who helped her so much injured. So when the woman is driving the vehicle, she decides to take them both to the hospital. At the scene, doctors warn that Ri Jong is losing a lot of blood and needs to go to surgery urgently. As it is a small hospital, there is no blood bank, so the protagonist is responsible for finding someone to donate. The soldier tries to explain to her that if she goes to the airport now, she might be able to catch the flight, but that is no longer her priority, and upon discovering that her blood type is compatible with the captain's, Se-ri offers to donate. While in the anguish of waiting for news of Ri Jong's surgery, the woman receives the clothes he was wearing and, upon unfolding them, discovers that the man had kept a photo of Se-ri in his things, the one she had taken for him. The passport. The protagonist is moved because, when she suggested they take one as a souvenir, he was arrogant, and in the end, he kept one in secret. Later, the surgery was completed successfully, and now we just have to wait for the captain to recover. While the man remains unconscious, we see Ri Jong in a performance. He received a lot of applause from the audience, but when leaving the stage, it seems that the captain had lost his ground when he received the news that his brother had died in a car accident. So Ri Jong would have to return to his country, and while waiting for the boat to transport his things, a little girl asked if he could play a song on his piano. The man said yes, and for the first and last time, the captain played the song that he had created for his brother, who didn't even have the opportunity to hear it. When Ri Jong wakes up, the protagonist can't control his happiness when she sees him with his eyes open. However, the man doesn't understand why she's still in place. Frustrated at having almost lost his life and putting his soldier at risk, the man yells at Se-ri and says that she doesn't understand that she is always putting them in danger, that her efforts today were all in vain, and that the protagonist shouldn't be there anymore. So Se-ri decides to let him rest and leaves the room, then tells the medical team that the captain has woken up. When they are explaining the situation to her patient, the nurse comments that Ri Jong and his girlfriend were made for each other, as they have the same blood type, and so she can save his life. And the doctor adds that he thought the woman would faint from crying and that she must be in some other corner of the hospital crying at that exact moment. The captain ends up recognizing that he was very rude and goes to look for Se-ri. When he finds her, he apologizes for the things he said to her and adds that she wanted to go home so much that she should have done that. But the protagonist responds that at least once, she would have to protect him since the man did so much for her. In the end, the two end up kissing. In the next scene, we see Mr. Cho. He already knows that Ri Jong is involved in preventing the South Korean woman from ending her life and asks his men to call all the hospitals in the region so they can locate him. And Sung Joon is already nervous with so much worry about not having been able to find the protagonist yet. It turns out that the men he is paying to keep him in North Korea understood that they would have to stop the woman from returning to the South, no matter the cost. Whatever the cost, however, in truth, the man wanted her very much alive. Seo Dan goes with his mother to the village where Captain Ri lives, and at first Se-ri's friends are very harsh with women. However, after the bride's mother delivers facial products to the wives, they decide to help both of them find an apartment for Seo Dan to move into. Sung Joon has the car parked near the captain's house to see if one of the two appears at the scene and ends up coming across Seo Dan arriving. The man is surprised to learn that Ri Jong is the fiancé of this beautiful woman and how the two are waiting for the same person. Sung Joon offers her to wait in the comfort of his car with him. Back at the hospital, the nurse tells Ri Jong and the protagonist that she saw a couple kissing the night before, and she thought it was absurd. Se-ri sewed a heart on the captain's uniform to disguise the bullet hole, and the two agreed not to pressure each other about what happened the night before. Sung Joon and Seo Dan get along well. The man talks to her about marriage and says he knows how she feels since there was one that was arranged too, but it ended up not working out. The next day, Mr. Cho managed to locate where Ri Jong was being treated and went to the place with trucks full of soldiers. Luckily, Se-ri was outside at the time and managed to hide when she had the opportunity. He called Sung Joon to pick him up. In the captain's room, Mr. Cho reveals that he already knows that the protagonist is a South Korean and speaks as if Ri Jong had shot the engineering soldiers for no reason, but the man makes it clear that someone tried to cause an accident and he was simply protecting her. The captain questions how Mr. Cho is sure that the woman is not a spy and reveals that he knows that he discovered that the man asked someone to investigate her without the necessary authorization to do so. Of course, Mr. Cho didn't like the way Ri Jong spoke and ordered him to be arrested, but his father arrived at that moment and didn't allow that to happen. The protagonist returns to the hospital. The man who is going to pick her up hasn't arrived yet, and the woman needs to disguise that she is with a patient when Seo Dan passes by her so that she doesn't get into any more problems. And in the room, the bride notices the heart sewn into the captain's uniform. When she asks about it, Ri Jong says that she likes the protagonist and has no intention of deceiving Seo Dan. That's why she's telling her. The woman doesn't take it very well. She says that when Se-ri leaves, his feelings for her will disappear and that even with the news that he likes someone else, Seo Dan will continue with the wedding scheduled. Se-ri managed to hide until Mr. Cho left with the soldiers and got along very well with the patient. Then Sung Joon arrived and the woman got in the car. At the place where Sung Joon is staying, he says that everyone is happy with the news that the protagonist is okay. However, the woman doesn't believe that her brothers would say that and begins to distrust the man. Sung Joon even lies about the meeting that would declare the company's new heir. He says it was postponed, but we see in the next scene that the meeting actually took place and Se Hyang was elected through votes. And Se-ri's father ends up declaring that she lost her life due to the time she has been missing. At night, Seo Dan goes with his mother to a store to see her wedding dress. The owner brought a magazine from South Korea, which shows the models that are in fashion, and while browsing, the woman found an article talking about Se-ri. She rips out the page and goes to the hospital to confront her fiancé to find out if he was hiding the truth from her. Meanwhile, Ri Jong is searching the hospital's cameras for any sign of the protagonist, as she simply disappeared after Mr. Cho was the visitor, and he ends up seeing the woman getting into Sung Joon's car. Then the man calls his uncle by Seo Dan, who discovers that the vehicle is being used for something in an inn that has been closed for a while, which is a bit suspicious. At Sung Joon's house, the protagonist wanted to call the captain to let him know that she is fine. However, the man doesn't let her and says that the best thing she can do at the moment is to stay away, as Ri Jong could end up losing her life. Life for Se-ri's selfishness, these words weigh on her mind. Seo Dan confronts the captain, and he confesses that he already knew who she really was and that he is helping her hide in the north. However, she will soon go to the south, and Ri Jong makes it clear that he is willing to lose everything, even his life, to help her. But Seo Dan is also willing to do anything for the one she loves and says that if he does something dangerous, the woman will act. In the next scene, we see the protagonist's past. When she traveled to Switzerland, Saeri no longer had any desire to live. However, something changed within her when she heard a song being played on a piano on the edge of a lake. That melody changed her mind about her life and saved her. Over the years, the protagonist performed a snippet for several people who knew a lot about music, but she never found anyone who knew her. Returning to the captain, the hospital director said he could use anything he needed, and the man asked to borrow an ambulance to go after Saeri. But as he almost ends up falling off a cliff on the way, he decides to go back to recover in the hospital. The next day, Sung Joon calls Ri Jong to let her know that he is with the protagonist, that the woman is fine, and that the man doesn't need to spend his time looking for her. The captain becomes even more nervous after the call, and one of the soldiers who always picks on Saeri says that the woman must have asked her boyfriend from the south to call because she doesn't have the courage, and Ri Jong gets excited, saying that the man doesn't think it's her boyfriend and that the soldier is saying something he doesn't know. The captain shouted so much that the patient in the next room appeared to ask him to speak a little quieter, and when she discovers that he is the man the protagonist likes, she starts saying that the woman had already told her about him. Ri Jong is surprised that Saeri made such a quick friend in the hospital, and even more so when he discovers that the protagonist had said that he was her favorite person. When the patient leaves, the man has a smile that none of his soldiers have seen before. As soon as he is discharged, the captain finds out where Saeri's house is through the different power cables in the middle of the forest. Returning to the protagonist, she remembers when Ri Jong taught her that in all hotel rooms there are bugs, and when searching hers, she discovers several. Afterwards, the protagonist takes what she collected to Sung Joon and the man who helps him. She sits down with the two and wants to know how they plan for her to go to the south. The plans don't seem to exist, so Sung Joon proposes that the two get married with their fake names, so they can leave the place with a foreign passport without looking suspicious. Meanwhile, Seo Dan's mother invites the captain's soldiers to eat and drink with her. One of them ends up getting a little upset and talks all about Saeri. The others even tried to stop her but couldn't. Returning to the protagonist, as it's Christmas Eve, Sung Joon invites her to dinner with him and ends up making the marriage proposal official with a ring. In fact, the man says he never stopped thinking about her, and the dinner is interrupted when Ri Jong turns off the house lights. The man takes out all the guards around him, despite not having recovered 100%. Before leaving, Sung Joon tells the protagonist that if she decides to stay with the captain, his fiancée will denounce him and he will lose his life, so the best Saeri can do is stay away from the man. When he leaves the house, Ri Jong says that he went to the place to look for her and that although he failed in his plans to take her to the south, he will find another way. However, the protagonist makes it clear that he won't do it again, and she doesn't want to take any more risks. She tells him about the marriage proposal she just received and asks the man to leave. After a while, the woman continues on the street crying, thinking about how cold it is and that her loved one could end up freezing, so she decides to take the first car she finds and go after him. When she finds him, Saeri says that nothing has changed in her decision to follow Sung Joon's plan and that they will no longer be able to see each other. However, when the woman goes to start, she discovers that the vehicle is out of gas and they will have to spend a while more time together than she had planned. The two go to a school close to where they are so they can light a fire and warm up. In the next scene, we see Mr. Cho talking to a man about the military director. It seems that this director wants to remove Captain Ri's father from power, and if Mr. Cho brings information that helps him achieve this, they will succeed. So Mr. Cho gives the information to the military director that Captain Ri is sheltering a South Korean woman and asks the man to get approval for an investigation that will bring down Ri Jong's family. Returning to Saeri, she takes care of the captain, who has a fever, and asks how he and Seo Dan met and if they attended the same school. But the man says no, it was a marriage arranged through his parents. Meanwhile, the listener is drinking in front of his house, watching the stars, and his wife approaches to ask what is happening, so the listener vents, saying that he let a man who treated him the way he deserved lose his life. And he is loyal to someone who treats him like an animal. He adds that if something happened to Captain Ri because of him, like what happened to his brother, the listener would not be able to forgive himself. Ri Jong is dreaming of a memory the day he gave the watch to his brother with the money from an award the captain had received. The accessory is the same as the one the protagonist had seen in the pawn shop. The luck of that soldier who opened his mouth to Seo Dan's mother is that the woman the next day didn't remember anything he said. Despite having written down some key words, she doesn't remember. She's just sure that if it's something shocking. The protagonist and the captain return to his house. However, as Mr. Cho is after the woman, he calls the wiretap to find out if the man has returned to the residence, and Manbok lies that the house is empty. Se-ri ends up bumping into the village's wives and taking advantage of meeting them. She decides to sell her engagement ring at the pawn shop and buy gifts to thank them for the advice and friendships they created. The protagonist took her brother's watch from the captain without knowing it to give it to him as a gift too. Meanwhile, the protagonist's right-hand man and another man who was happy that she was his boss continued trying to find her and took the audio they found with Se-ri's voice to the police to investigate. However, brother Se-hyung told the police that he did not recognize the voice and that it could not be his sister's, so the authorities ruled it out. So the two have another plan to find the protagonist's father and show him the audio of his daughter. At first, it doesn't go very well, as the men are waiting for him in the company's garage, and the one who appears first is Se-hyung. Then the man appears, but his son tries to silence the two men, and so his father ends up entering. But he heard the men inside shouting something about Se-ri and decided to go back and listen. Returning to the captain, he wakes up better after a long sleep, and when he leaves his room, the protagonist improvises a Christmas tree for him. Later, when the man is in the courtyard of his house, he receives a call from a number he hadn't saved, and when he answers, he hears Se-ri's voice. The woman tells her that she is leaving with Sung-jun and that she didn't have the opportunity to say goodbye. However, when Ri Jong asks her to tell him where she is, he says that it doesn't matter if she is far away or not. The man just wants to say goodbye. Amidst her tears at having two men point guns at her, the woman just repeats what they wanted her to say, and at the end, when she deviates a little from the script and says that she loves Captain Ri, one shoots up, and then the connection is disconnected. At that moment, Ri Jong's heart stopped, and tears fell from her face. It turns out that when she was returning home with the captain's gift in her hands, these two men appeared, pointing a gun at the protagonist, and took her away. In shock, the woman ended up dropping the gift and staying behind. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share to help me. Until next time.